Thank you so much and welcome. You can tell it starts with a quick story. So one night, Michelle and Barack Obama are going into a swanky New York restaurant. As soon as they enter the room, the owner of the restaurant spots them and has a quick word with one of the security services. As both of the Obamas are seated, the security agent came over to Michelle Obama. That gentleman in the corner wants to have a quick chat with you. Is that okay? Michelle Obama left the table. 5 minutes later, she came back. Barack Obama was a little bit puzzled. What was all that about? Well, said Michelle, years ago when I was a crazy teenager, I was madly in love with that guy. Ah, said Barack. Then, had you married that guy, you would be the owner of this wonderful restaurant. Michelle Obama struck a look back at him and said, no, if I'd married that guy, he would have become President of the United States. So welcome to International Women's Day 2024. For those that don't know me, my name is Nigel Smith, immediate past president of PMI UK. And what do I want to cover today about resilience? Am I an expert in resilience? No, I'm not, but I am an expert in my own life. And I have to tell you, I've had to have resilience at the good times and the bad times in my life. I've been made redundant or restructured 3 times. At the age of 30, I was in the top 10% of management in BMW Group. I know that because current CEO at the time, Bernd Pistenstrieder, told me so. So I had to sort of juggle between dark times and also times when I think I've been promoted out of my competence. I guess today you would call it imposter syndrome, but you still need resilience at those times to keep going. So what we're going to talk about today? Well, a little bit about myself, a little bit. We're going to talk about the rainbow that comes after the storm. This actual presentation was formed during COVID, one of the darkest times of my recent career and life, I have to say, but I've come out the other side really bouncing back. And I want to talk about the sort of things, the sort of strategies and tips that you can use to overcome bad times and cope with good times. Now, a lot of it you will have heard from Lucilla already. There's a few themes I heard in the green room, some of the stuff she was saying, but these are really good to be reinforced to everybody. I will offer up some low-hanging fruit, stuff that works for me. It may or may not work for you, but I would implore you to give it a go. These sort of things are going to take action. There's also going to be a time for a piece of self-reflection with yourself, a little bit like Lucilla did as well. And then time dependent, we will have some questions. Now, a little bit about me. This slide's got 2 reasons on it. A, I'm an accidental project manager. I didn't know I was doing it. Project management chose me and I became one, just wandered into it, and rest, they say, is history. The other reason I've put this up, I did mention this particular webinar was developed in the time of COVID. For those of you that are UK based, you will know about the National Health Service, or as I like to call it, the National Hero Service. And as part of that, you'll remember that fantastic rainbow slogan that was all across during the COVID period. What I've done today, I've done a complete acronym of rainbows, 8 great tips that you can use to build your resilience. So I always like to start off any of my webinars or presentations with a quote. And I trust you'll find that this one just trips off the tongue. It took me months to research this, but fundamentally what I believe is that resilience is that capacity to navigate through adverse and great times, meet challenges head on, all within a positive mindset. I cannot emphasize the positive mindset. And to spring back to an improved version of yourself, taking good care of yourself and others. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that's really memorable. Okay, so when this presentation's finished, that's just going to trip off your tongue. No, it's not. It took me months to come up with that. This is the one that I'd like you to leave with today. We're talking about your bounce back ability, getting yourself into that improved version of yourself. So then, just to put a bit of context, I said this was set back in COVID times. So along came a virus. Everything was volatile, it was uncertain, it was complex, and it was ambiguous. It felt like the world of sci-fi and fantasy actually was becoming current affairs. And we entered what we saw was a new normal. Were things going to be the same they were pre-COVID? No, of course not. They were going to be different. How are we going to cope with that? And is this a threat or an opportunity? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Because fundamentally, are you a glass half full person or a glass half empty person? And what I want to focus on first and foremost, I'm just going to hide some results. If folks want to use that QR code in the bottom left-hand corner, go on to Menti. You should find this particular screen, and you've got an opportunity to put a dot on the screen where you think you are on what I call the grief curve or the Kubler-Ross. And this is a cycle that we all go through at dramatic times of change during our life. For example, for me, it could be when I was made redundant on one of those occasions. It could be when I faced a promotion outside of my limit. It could be when I'd lost a family member or close friend. We go through these stages. And what I want to try and build a bridge for all of you here today is to get you a bridge that cuts across that depression bit, the lowest bit on this particular curve. I want you to go from frustration and anger through to acceptance and curiosity. I have a range of tips, tools, and techniques which hopefully will empower you to get to that position where you're able to move forward with change. Now, I'm going to release the hide on the Menti results in just a moment. I'm expecting a plethora of dots all over the place. If you haven't yet focused onto Menti, please do so. I'm going to release it now and see where everybody is. Well, fantastic. We're all project managers, aren't we? We're all in the positive sense. So I'm talking to the right audience here today. I've got some fantastic tips for people that are already in that more positive zone. So a few folks there battling a little bit with frustration. We've got one or two people around the depression zone, but curiosity, I think curiosity is a famous quote about curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back was actually a phrase that I finished off earlier this week. So a few folks all over there. And what I want to do, as I say, is build that bridge to avoid that area of depression. Now, I spoke about rainbows, okay? This was the icon, it was the symbol of everything here in the UK around COVID when the NHS were doing their fantastic job. And what I've tried to do, and there's a lot of overlap in what I'm doing here, there's a lot of overlap with what you heard from Lucilla previously. I've just tried to be a little bit creative and ingenious, saying, for an R, do these things, and just tell you a brief story around some of those. So let's make a start. So R fundamentally starts for embrace positive routine. I think we all know about habits and repeated actions. And when you do those, they do become those routines. And those routines then become part of your automatic way that you actually do and embrace things. And it could be a number of things. I'll show you what my daily prime was in just one moment. But they do say it takes 21 days to create a habit. In my personal experience, I actually think it takes a lot longer than that, but actually it takes far less than 21 days to actually lose a habit. But these are things that you can do personally for yourself. And I'm just going to share some examples of what I did. Okay, and there's a fantastic quote there. It is from Sean Covey, not Stephen Covey. Sean Covey was Stephen Covey's son. He says, what we become, what we repeatedly do. This was my COVID daily prime. Okay, I'll talk about the calendar with the 3 in a little later. That's about journaling. The second one was all about be hydrated, taking 2.5 litres of water a day, get enough sleep, manage my weight. That's the one thing I still haven't managed even today. So a big X goes there. Walk 10,000 steps and read like Obama 60 minutes a day. So by and large, for the last 4 years, I've done a number of those and other things to put me into a routine and a habit. And one of the most excruciating habits I have on a daily basis, if anyone's familiar with the Wim Hof cold water therapy, it is a cold shower. And I can tell you, because I did it again this morning, there is nothing that prepares you for the onslaught of cold water. But if you can bear it, it does have some really great health benefits. Or so they tell you. It doesn't feel like it does, but I have to say I did go through all of COVID without actually getting it. So maybe I'll put it down to that. But it's just a habit. It's something that I do. I don't look forward to it. I put myself in a position that it's very uncomfortable. I don't like it, but I still go through with it. And then moving on, we're going to go on to A. So A for me is probably one of the most important things we have control over in our lives. And that A represents showing up with the right attitude. We'll come on to a bit of a Menti question in just a moment, but for me, this is absolutely fundamental. We'll find in life that very often we'll react to situations, and the reaction often is the size of the problem you get. If you get the event plus a reaction, the outcome can be absolutely massive, bigger than the event itself. So what I would advise you all to do is actually choose a response rather than a reaction. And sometimes a response is not to respond at all, or just to dial it down, or just take time out. And like Lucilla was saying earlier, just breathe. I would always say never be a victim, always be at cause and not effect. So if you find yourself complaining about a lot of things, and I know because I've been there, you might want to start to look at what's on the other side of the same coin, because what you really want to do is put yourself in a position where you're in control of things. You're the cause of things that are happening and moving forward. And the big takeaway from this particular segment is all around you can't control everything, just control the controllables. You can influence things, but that may be as far as you can go with certain activities. And it's a classic quote. I think there's a lot of people that have actually put their names forward as to where it actually first came from, but it is actually how you respond to adversity, or how you respond what happens to you, rather than the event itself. And that is a defining thing for people to recognize. And so again, just going back onto Menti, I was just really interested to understand from, I'll hide the results again for just 1 second. I'll give people a chance to just log into Menti once more. But what is it you think we're able to control? Is it everyone else? Is it what other people think and do? Is it our attitude and action? Maybe it's the weather, or what other people think. Let's have a look. Okay, bit of a limited input, but actually fundamentally everyone's right on point here. We cannot control anybody else. Now, of course, in the realm of being project managers, we're assumed we're going to get results and we're going to control everything. But frankly, if I'm honest about myself, I have a problem actually controlling myself at times. So the ability to control anybody else is absolutely, it just doesn't happen at all. So we have to be mindful about where our remit goes. And attitude and action really are the only two things we have. Attitude, turn up with the right mindset. You know, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, as Henry Ford once said, you're probably right. And then action. Action is the only thing that brings about change. You can think all you like about doing something, but if you don't take action, nothing will ever happen. Next up, I want to go for I. So what is I all about? Well, I fundamentally is referring to figure out what's really important. And what I would say here is, you know, do not major on the minor, do not minor on the major, but major on the major. Do what is right over what is easy. It's very easy for us, isn't it, to do things that we like. If anyone's familiar with the works of Brian Tracy, who wrote a fantastic book called Eat That Frog, it isn't very thick. It's a fantastic read. It's all about prioritization. It's all about overcoming procrastination. It's about getting things done. And again, this is where action does come in. If you can get, according to Brian Tracy, you can get the biggest, ugliest frog and eat it in the morning, as in the biggest, most horrible task you've got, the rest of your day will be a lot better. And as I use this as a reference book. It's pretty good. It's taught me a lot of things over the years. One of the things, again, that I've learned, I am actually what's known as a recovering perfectionist as a project manager. I'm driven by results, standards, quality, process. But you know what? Good is good enough. Speed over perfection, progress over perfection, getting things done. You know, you've got that statement of work. Do not gold plate it. The customer's not paying for it. Do whatever is defined. Good is good enough. Deliver what's asked for, nothing less, nothing more. Although having said that, I would often go for what I would call a baker's dozen. And in that, I would say, instead of giving them 12 or something, maybe 13. So show your uniqueness, show your differentiation in the style and the way that you can deliver more value, but fundamentally only deliver what's asked for, would be my particular tip. And then banish distractions. Now, for a very long time, for my mobile phone, I actually stuck it onto grayscale mode. I don't know if anyone has ever done that, but it looks completely dull. And there was days before I'd actually pick my phone up. And of course, I missed loads of important notifications, text messages, and all the rest of it. But it did stop me from picking it up every 5 minutes. And I think the other thing here is all about make your work visible. Now, we're all project managers. We all know about Kanban. We all know it's part of the agile principles and mindset that we adhere to today. But I can tell you, this had its roots back from the Toyota Motor Corporation back in the 1950s, been rebadged, re-engineered, reused into something that's really useful for us today. When you can make your work visible, it's much, much easier to communicate to people, to share the vision, and to create that alignment. And I think in some of these times as well, it's also worthwhile to set your own boundaries about what you can and what you cannot achieve. And I know that we don't like using the word no very often, but sometimes you do have to use the word no if it's getting a little bit too much. Frankly, if you say yes to somebody else or other people all the time, you are definitely saying no to yourself for something else. Maybe just think on that for just a moment. And then again, another one of my favorite quotes on this is all around being prepared. Chance favors the prepared. Chance favors those who network. It's always good. And of course, we are, of course, project managers. We prepare, we think about risks and things that may never happen. But the ability to be prepared puts us in, I believe, a much more advantageous position. So I don't have time for a summary. No, we're cracking on. We're onto the reign of rainbow. And of course, every rainbow follows a storm. So for N, and again, I think Lucilla touched on a few of these things, it's pretty much try something new. And it could be a multitude of things. It could be things that you did in your childhood that you actually, probably at the most curious time of your entire life, things that you enjoyed and loved. Maybe it was reading, maybe it was writing, maybe it was painting. Now, I can tell you my partner, Sue, she's just got on her iPhone this Zen colouring app, and it just does my head in. She spends hours on it, but according to her, it's incredibly cathartic. It's a bit like digital paint by numbers, but it just takes her into a complete zone where actually she's relaxed, she's de-stressed, she's in her own space, and frankly, she's pretty good to be around at those particular times. But it's not for me, it doesn't work for me, but I can see how just reading, writing and painting, those sort of things can actually be really good for you. Another one, and I was going to play a clip of music, but I couldn't get these links to work pretty well. I was going to play you the soundtrack from my youth, which if anyone's interested, is a song called Teenage Kicks by the Undertones, a band from Northern Ireland way back when, last century. But they start off with a really great guitar riff, and the first line is, "A teenage dream is so hard to beat." And for me, that sort of sums up life in its own way, because back then, when I was a teenager, I was a dreamer. The world was my oyster. I was going to live forever. Everything is possible. Now, of course, as we go through life, we recognize that isn't always the way. But one great thing that music does do, it can transport you from a point in time back to when that music was important to you. And at the same time, you start to get all those feelings and everything associated with it, and that can really change your state and make you feel really positive. So get out all those old 7-inch records that you've got. If you've got a record player, dust it down and get it going. You might have CDs. CDs have come and gone. I'm not sure all millennials know actually what a CD is. Maybe you've got a cassette tape. Maybe you just sing it. Maybe you go onto YouTube. It's a fantastic thing. I do it a lot. I subscribe to a couple of music subscriptions, and it's just a wonderful way of resetting your state and remembering those great times when you first heard that music. And it might be a great idea, of course, to dust down those deja vu goals, the ones that keep coming and going. And the reason they keep coming and going is because you either don't stick a date on it, or you don't take any action. But I'm here to tell you, and this is a world first tip for all of you right here, right now. I can tell you, if you've got a well-defined goal, that the distance between you and your goal is that much. It's just that much. And the reason it's that distance is because that's the distance between your ears. And fundamentally, the achievement of your goal is all about how you think about it, what your attitude's like, and what actions you take to move forward. We should be coming up with a great quote. Oh yeah, no, what makes you feel good? So again, you might want to regress to times when you had great experiences, might be on a great project or a great holiday or something like that, and recreate those situations that bring you that joy. And again, another great quote that I like, it's a bit like the rocking chair testing coaching. You sit back at the end of your life and you're thinking, well, I'm really great. I took those actions when I did, and really reflect on this. So a year from now, what are the things you'll be saying to yourself that you wished you had started and made a decision on today? You can even do it with your projects, for example. When you've got your next go live coming up, you could say, do you know what? On March the 8th, I'm really glad I took that action, because actually it got us to where we are right now. Okay, it is time for a bit of a recap. We're sort of storming through this. We're halfway through. So we talked about positive routine. What we repeatedly do becomes habits. Habits are beneficial. Habits can also be negative as well. We know we talked about distractions a little bit. One of the biggest distractions starts with N, ends in Netflix. So these are the things that can also become habits, but might not be serving us that well. So just do make sure that they are positive. Attitude is the most important thing I think we can apply. One of only 2 things that we actively control. Work out in life what's really important. Focus on the major. Major on the major. Do not major on the minor, or minor on the major, but major on the major. And try something new. Do something you've done before. Try something you've never done before. See where it takes you. So now we're on to B. And I have to say, I have to introduce this by saying this is something that the US Navy SEALs do. It's something my local village teacher does. It's something that actually Lucilla's already spoken about. And it's something we do thousands of times every day, but probably we don't think about it enough. And that's remembering to breathe. Now, I can tell you, a few years ago, I was flying back from New York to London, and the second worst experience happened to me on that flight. Now, of course, the first worst experience that can happen on a plane is, of course, it crashes. And this is the second worst thing that can happen. So we've all been in a flight, haven't we, where all of a sudden the plane loses a bit of altitude, you drop down, and it feels like a bit of a roller coaster ride, and it just happens once or twice. It's a bit of fun. But then when the cabin starts shaking and the emergency lights come on and some of the overhead lockers start opening and people start screaming, you know it's a little bit serious. And then, if you recall from the safety briefing, what happens next? The oxygen masks deploy from the cabinet above your head. And it's important to recognize in that moment, which actually is probably the most frightening aspect of what could happen in your life, possibly close to death, you're told to do two distinct things. The first thing that you're asked to do is to put on your mask, and if anyone can remember what the stewardess or the flight attendant says next, is to breathe normally. Just breathe normally. Now, if you can imagine breathing normally when you've got the impending doom of this plane probably crashing, it probably doesn't ring true. But actually, being calm, being collected, being grounded is the best state that you can be in a really traumatic experience. And the other thing to mention, the second thing they say on the safety flight briefing is put your mask on before you attend and help anybody else. Because, great metaphor here, if you're not grounded yourself, how can you help anybody else? So here I've said sometimes we simply forget, and actually Lucilla introduced us to a technique of breathing. Mine is slightly different. It's called the 4x4x4 technique. I'm not going to practice it now due to time, but I would encourage people to do this, to breathe in for a count of 4 through the nose, really deep breathing. Make sure your stomach goes out and fills up rather, and then hold and then exhale for 4 seconds. And actually, if anyone has got these from a local stationers, these are those little green sticky dots. What I do around the house, I sometimes do it in the car actually. I'll put a dot by the fridge or on the side of the laptop or near the phone, whatever, or even on the steering wheel. And when I go and make a drink or do something, I'll see the green dot and I'll just stand there and just take 2 or 3 minutes just to breathe. And it's amazing how you can get that particular state change. And of course, we all know breathing deeply is much better than breathing shallow. You don't want to hyperventilate. And of course, it does help your mind and increasingly manage your state, because how you manage your state is how other people see you. So you want to be seen in the best circumstance. And again, just a reminder here, when was the last time you put your own oxygen mask on first? Metaphorically, of course, within your projects, your life, any other activities that you do, you have to take care of yourself first before you can be of any assistance and any use to anybody else. Okay, we're fast coming through now to O. So O, what does O stand for? Well, we're all pretty, we've had the internet for like 30 odd years, haven't you? Let me introduce you then to what I call the outernet. And again, this is just getting out there and being part of nature. It's about being present. I think Lucilla mentioned some elements of mindfulness and things like that. And of course, there's a recommendation, I think it's from the World Health Organization, or I'm just making it up, that actually everybody should meditate for at least 20 minutes a day. And if you're busy and you can't meditate for 20 minutes a day, you should meditate for 60 minutes a day. And of course, being mindful is all about paying attention to the things that you often don't pay attention to rather. And it's all about acknowledging your thoughts. I know there's that question for Lucilla about, to recognize them. And I think the answer is yes, you do. But what I would say, think of it like passing clouds. You can sort of metaphorically grab a cloud, but that cloud's going to move and it's going to go away. The other great metaphor that I shared once was, it's a bit like when you're fishing, and you're fishing the water, you see that hook. You don't necessarily have to grab onto it. You can just let it go. You have to recognize things, but equally, you have to let them go and just float away from your mind. And that's why the cloud analogy works really well with myself. And create a journal. Now, I touched on this in my daily prime from my routine. I've been doing this exclusively now since COVID time. Creating a journal, it can be called a gratitude diary, anything like that. And what I do is I write down 3 things every day that I'm grateful for. And I have to tell you that some days I can't think of one, if I'm honest. And other days I struggle to think of less than 10. It does go like that. And it's not something that I necessarily read, but what I can tell you is it gives you a safe space for 10 to 15 minutes every day for you to think in a positive state of mind about the things that have happened to you during that day. Now, it's worth saying, of course, that not every day is great, but what I can tell you is there is great in every day. So there's always something positive to find. If you get into the habit of doing that, it can be fantastic. And sometimes I look back and say, what was I doing this time last year? Or what was I really grateful for this time last year? And it's really uplifting and it's really interesting about what you're up to. So it does provide that sort of diarisation, but it's recommended. But again, you've got to make it a habit. And there's another great quote that I really love. I think it's anonymous. I'd love to have claimed this one, but there is no Wi-Fi in nature, but you will, of course, get a much better connection. And I just want to share with you now, actually, how I do a lot of my mindfulness. This is my 3.5-year-old Springer Spaniel, Brody. We go for loads of walks, and it's my mindful release time. I think Lucilla talked about going for a walk. There's somebody talking about petting your cat or your pets in general. These guys, absolute lifesavers in terms of, I think they're also empaths as well. They also know your state of mind and they're really close to you. So that's how I cope with this. And again, Brody was a COVID dog as well. But moving forward, W, what on earth can W stand for? Well, fundamentally, it's about well-being. Embrace positive well-being. Again, some of this is from the routine stuff I spoke about earlier. So staying active, getting outside. It's about boosting your immune system. I've got blueberries on here. Apparently they do that. I'm no nutritionist, but I'm sure you can find out resources that'll tell you these things. One of my techniques for this, I've spoke about it already, is that cold shower. I'm sure at the end of the day, people will tell me that actually it doesn't do anything apart from just make you shiver. What I can tell you about a cold shower is it's incredibly mindful, because when you're hit with cold water, you do not think about anything else. If you've got lots of things on your mind, take a cold shower, because all you will think about is that cold water and when it's going to stop. It's such a great shock to the system. I can understand why people like cold plunges. Try it at least once and see how you get on. If you can manage 20 seconds, try and get it to a minute, try and get it to 2 minutes. What I can say is if you do get past 1 minute, actually it doesn't feel cold anymore. And that sounds quite counterproductive, but give it a go. See if it works for you. And again, eat, sleep, hydrate. This is going back to some of the principles about put your own oxygen mask on first. Make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you are eating properly. Make sure you are taking on board enough fluids. And the real one bit here, and again, this goes back to the things that Lucilla was talking about community. Find your tribe. What is it you're interested in? You know, where's that going to take you? Who can you connect with? Another one of my favorite quotes is from a guy called Jim Rohn, who was the mentor to Tony Robbins. And he said, you know, you are the average of the 5 people that you keep the most company with. And in that, I'll probably include yourself. So, you know, these people are ones that are going to make you rise, become that better version of yourself. Now, again, it's a little bit like habits. If you get yourself in with the wrong crowd, you can go in the opposite direction. So seek and find your tribe. And from my perspective, that is Toastmasters, it is PMI UK, and that's some of the semi-professional things that I do, but I've also got interests in sports and reading and all sorts of other outdoor activities. And you find that community of people that do similar things. So really, you know, for me at least, a motivational part of who I am. And I think it's also important to say, you know, it is okay not to be okay, and we can't all be at the top of our game all the time. We don't always have the energy that we need. we need to relax, reset, and restart. And again, another anonymous quote. I'd love to have taken this one as well, but your health is your wealth. And when you get to the autumn of your career, where I am, it's actually is, and that does mean a lot more than it does at the start of your career, because fundamentally it is about taking care of yourself, and it's more than monetary things at that particular stage. So another quick recap. I think I've got a few minutes. I'm not looking at any chat at the moment, so I'm just going to keep going on this. So we've gone through routine, we've gone through attitude, work out what's important, try something different, try something new. Remember to breathe. Try that outer net. How can you be mindful doing something away from the screens that we spend so much time in every day? And then embrace positive well-being. Now, there's a bit of a bonus here because, of course, this is rainbows, as in plural. So, and again, Lucilla's stolen my thunder on this a little bit, but fundamentally, the S does stand for smile. And she's also pointed out really correctly that a smile is a mirror. So a smile is a little bit like a yawn in a way, because if you do it in front of other people, they're likely to smile back. It's a great rapport builder. It's a great relationship builder. And the one fundamental thing about a smile actually is that when you smile, and we had that great video from Lucilla, when you smile, you instantly feel happy. And conversely, it works the other way around. I can't explain it because it's something I don't really understand. But when you feel happy inside, it's easier to smile as well. So it works both ways. It's a fantastic way of doing it. So there it is on the screen just there. It is a mirror. Ah, right. We're coming on to this now. So for those of you that still harbour some limiting beliefs in terms of what you can't do, just a quick question here for you about the humble hummingbird, because there's a great story around this, but I just want to find out from folks in the room, maybe know a little bit about hummingbirds, maybe not. What is the one thing they cannot do? Is it fly backwards? Is it walk? Is it fly upside down? Or is it smell? There's one of those things they cannot do. And there's a really profound story at the end of this. I think I'll release the results now because I think I'm running out of time a little bit. Okay. Well, actually, I know we've only got limited results, but fundamentally, whoever said they can't walk is absolutely correct. They can clench on branches, that's fine. They can fly forwards, backwards, sideways. They can even fly upside down. Now, if you're a scientist or a biologist, anything in the natural sciences, they would be saying that actually it is impossible for the physics of a hummingbird for it to actually fly upside down. But the important point here is nobody told the hummingbird. Okay, so just because they said it was impossible, actually it means that it isn't actually, it's possible for that bird to do that. So stretch beyond your limiting beliefs, stretch beyond your comfort zone into your growth zone, become that better version of yourself. So I've gone on now for what seems like half an hour or so. I just wanted to just summarize, what does rainbows really give you, my acronym for things that you can try in your life to boost your bounce back ability. Well, it makes you adaptable, you know, and we have to remind ourselves of what Darwin said all those years ago about survival of the fittest. It's not the strongest or the most intelligent, it's those that are able to adapt to situations. So doing some of the tips I've suggested might take you towards that direction. I think as well, it also makes you more positive. If you think positive, you act positive. In a similar way, if you think negative, you'll always see negative. And with all these things, you will always attract the evidence you're looking for, you know, to support your view of confirmation bias or wherever it might be. How often is it when you buy a white car, you think to yourself, I don't see white cars on the road. Then every other car you see is white. It's because you've conditioned it in your mind. That's the evidence that you're looking for. So make it positive. Also, it's about balance and harmony. And a lot of this comes back to what I mentioned before about response over reaction. Tone it down, keep it small, keep it real, keep yourself grounded. And I also think you get a faster recovery. You become your ability to recharge, to overcome small incidents is much improved as you go through life, and you see things through a completely different lens and think about things in a slightly different perspective. And yeah, developing stronger relationships. In fact, great quote I always use from Tony Robbins. Some people can say things far better than I ever could. The quality of life fundamentally is the quality of your relationships, how you get on with other people. Community, PMI UK certainly taught me that community is massive. The more you put in, the more you can actually get out, and quality, that fitness for purpose on relationships, so important. So I've got a quick Menti question if folks want to jump in on here just before we come into the top of the hour. This is our reflective question that we always do with Merv on the UK webinar series. After listening to this, what's the most important thing you've heard? What is the one thing you're going to change? What could you do differently? What are you going to start, stop, or continue? If you want to share some thoughts with regard to that, I think we'll probably then go into questions in just a short while. I think I better use the chat to see I'm doing on time here. I think no one's bothering me. I'm okay. I'm going to hit the H and reveal some of these. I'm still waiting for some responses to come in. Maybe you can add them into comments as well. And yeah, I think at this point I'm just open to any questions. I think beyond this one, if anyone was interested, then you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want. I'm more than happy to do that and have a conversation, share some of my thoughts and things that I've done and things I probably haven't done. So with that in mind, you can share that. But I think at this time, Ruth, can hand back to yourself, and maybe you can see if there's any Q&A at all.
Hi there, Nigel. Thank you. That was amazing. I think that the combination of what Lucilla was talking about and then you bringing it home with rainbows was such a great pep talk. I think someone mentioned that they didn't even know we needed this pep talk right now. And I think that your points are just right on. So we have a comment from Ajala that she's so grateful about needing that pep talk indeed. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was from the standpoint of where people are in their continuum, would you say that rainbows works in general for every situation? It's just a matter of sort of where you want, which letter you want to focus on, so to say. Would that be your advice, depending on where we are in the continuum you showed?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that question in just a second, Liz. It just felt like this whole bit that Lucilla covered and I covered was actually rehearsed. But in honesty, the first time it all came together was like an hour ago. So, well, I'm just glad that the continuity and the great planning you've done for this event has stitched it together so well. What I'd like to say about all the things I've shared, I would say it's like a buffet table. When you go, you walk into these restaurants, all you can eat buffet, and you just, well, I'll have a bit of this and I'll go here and have a bit of that. I'll try this. That may not work for me. I think people have to find their own diet on this, because everything I've shared doesn't always work for me either. I mean, you saw early doors with my Daily Prime, the one about reducing weight actually didn't work for me. I'm still struggling with that. Some things I struggle with. I struggle to read. I like books with pictures in. I'm a very visual person. I like listening to things. Music's very important to me. For others, it may not be. What I would say to people is just try it, see what happens, reconnect with stuff. Certainly from my own perspective, stuff that I used to enjoy doing when I was a lot younger, even as a child, I really value today, and it grounds me in such a way. Because let's not forget, when we're about, I don't know, between the ages of, I guess, of 6 and 8, we're probably the most curious we ever are in our entire life in terms of the questions we ask. We keep asking why. And we get to a certain age, it gets beaten out of us, but we should still be asking the question why. So long answer to a short question is, I would say just try it before you trash it. It's not going to work for everybody, but some things of what I've shared may do. Not everything I've shared works for me. But see what works for everyone, because everyone's an individual, everyone's unique, everyone's in a different position, everyone's heading to a different destination, and that the beauty of our uniqueness is that we are all different. So there is no one size that fits all, I would say.
And that's the benefit, right? I always say to people, if you don't ask, you don't get. Well, similarly, if you don't try, you don't know. So I like that life is a great experiment and we can all try. Thank you so much again, Nigel.